What kind of pizza are you eating, Dave?
Well, I'm not proud to say this, but it's Domino's.
Well, that's perfect for Andrew Tate as the dominoes are starting to fall.
Yes, right. And it's just a well-known chain. Like what was the one that the pizza box
Yeah,
that he had?
is it like Jeffrey's?
Jerry's or something?
Yeah.
Jerry's or something.
We're also doing a chain, though. I believe it's a local Ohio chain. And I have to say,
oh, nice. Yeah. Oh,
it's called Marco's. But I have to say,
Marco's?
it's just local Domino's. It's nothing that I'd write home about.
No. Okay.
Could be worse. Could be Papa John's.
No, that's true.
Papa John's would have been on theme. Hey, welcome tonight. I just want to give everyone a quick welcome. Thanks for being coming to the show. If you have some pizza, join in as we celebrate the downfall of a. Is it fair to say asshat? Andrew Tate.
I think that's the appropriate designation. Yes.
Nice. So tonight we want to talk about Andrew Tate, and we don't have time to go into all the problems, but I was thinking about if the two of you were interested, maybe we could write 41 tenets of Andrew Tate as a prisoner, as opposed to his 41 tenets of how to be a man.
Yes.
So all that said, even though I was a bit disrespectful of Andrew Tate going into this, we do ask that you can ask and give any questions you want for us. We just ask that you be respectful, created, and gets disguised as being something sacred. He uses that word sacred a lot in his tenets. So Dave, you and I were chatting. You said, "Hey, I'd like to talk about Andrew Tate a bit tonight," which perfect. So we all ordered pizza. And we're going to tip our pizza to him. And actually, in all fairness, I'm tipping my pizza to Greta. So cheers, Greta.
Oh, for sure. Cheers to Greta.
With probably the best takedown on Twitter I think I've seen in a very long time. So
easily.
So Dave, tell me a little bit about why you also feel that this is an important conversation for us to be having. And I'll try not to chew in your ear.
Chew away, my friend, chew away. My 22-year-old son and I were having a conversation last night, and that continued on into this morning about how he and his friends, one loves Andrew Tate, but don't necessarily love Andrew Tate, but they really appreciate him because they say he speaks the truth. And that people are afraid to speak exactly right. And that people are afraid to speak the truth. And he's someone who's not afraid to do that. And so they think it's great. And that he speaks up for men because, women are, especially he's like saying to me how, you just don't know what girls are like these days kind of thing. And so my son, Don, you know my son, you've met my son, Andy. He's very, very sweet, very sweet. I would never say that he's this like toxically masculine kind of guy. But I just noticed listening to him that the message that Andrew Tate puts out there is very appealing to young men who aren't really sure about where they stand in the world and are trying to figure a whole lot of stuff out. And he speaks very strongly and convincingly and in black and white terms, which makes it very easy for people to swallow.
Do you think that's why it's received as being truth? Like when I think over the last several years between Trump and a lot of the people that kind of followed in that path, and someone like Andrew Tate, it's almost like if they say something in a bumper sticker format, very simplistic, very basic, and kind of what you said, black and white, and they say it aggressively, somehow that gets translated to being truth. I mean, Tana, what do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, I was going to say, Tana, you weigh in here on this.
I, you know, that's something I've been wondering about too. And I don't know that I think I would have to think about that a little bit. I don't know that I have other than the idea that in certain cases, the person like Andrew Tate or the person like Donald Trump is saying something that the hearer already agrees with, right? And so it's affirming to that audience. And so they're like, yes, they speak the truth, especially since, and this is where I would love to hear from you two. Um, there have been a lot of changes over the last several years and more of a push for diversity and equality and all good things that
Yes.
threaten the white male sort of status quo and the kind of default power a lot of white, particularly straight men have had. And that I'm guessing that feels uncomfortable to a lot of them. And so they feel uncomfortable, and but everybody, maybe not everybody, but a lot of the messages they're getting around them are saying, oh, we need equality and we need this and we need that, and that means you're going to have to change a little bit. And they're like, eh. And then here comes Andrew Tate or Donald Trump or somebody, and they're like, no, you don't. You know why? Here's
Yeah.
what's the truth of what's going on. And then they're like, oh, okay, now I understand why I was feeling so uncomfortable.
I loved your hand motion. It was kind of like, oh,
I'm
tell me
verklempt.
more. Tell me more.
I think that's spot on. I think we see a few major figureheads that have been able to capture this group's imagination. You got Trump, you got Tate, you got Jordan Peterson, you've got Steven Crowder, who's a little bit more fringe, but like guys that sort of have
Even
no
Seth Rogen, or
incentive.
not Seth Rogen,
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan.
Seth
Poor
Rogen is
Seth.
not quite that. I wouldn't say that Seth is all that manly in that of it. But I would say that um, a lot of it does come down to self-interest, right? So what is, you're right, Tana, that there is this massive movement of that's about gender and feminism and empowerment that seems to fly in the face of the old standard that guys used to be able to kind of get their way when they wanted to. And they're feeling that shift, and they don't really feel like they have much motivation or incentive to go along with it. And they hear these guys affirming the discomfort that they have, you know, and they're getting on the train. That's what I see. Don, what do you got? I'm gonna have another bite of pizza.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, right? There's the piece that men don't want to recognize that men have been the problem for a long time. And even if you yourself have not participated in causing harm or whatever, you've benefited from the systems that have propped men up, that have given men inroads into jobs, into positions of power, into all these different things. And even if you haven't done anything to manipulate those things, you still have benefited from them. We're now at a reckoning time in history, not just with male versus female, but also race, also sexuality, where there's a lot of things all at once happening. You talked about domino pizza, and said about dominoes falling. In a lot of ways, the dominoes have fallen very quickly around a handful of very key social constructs. And I think that in a lot of ways, men perceive that they have taken the brunt of those quick changes. And I don't think that men have taken the brunt of it, but men have definitely experienced a shift in things that were just a, a given, right? They were entitled to this. They were entitled to be heard. They were entitled to be empowered. They were entitled to all these things. And that entitlement has gone away. So that's the first piece that I think is big, which leads to what Tana was saying, where individuals are saying things that speak to them, feeling that struggle. Right? I'm going to say struggle because it's not a struggle. It's just that now men are experiencing what pretty much every other people group, and particularly white men, are experiencing what every other people group have just it was their normal. And now the playing field's been leveled, and white men in particularly are experiencing a more level playing field. It feels to a lot of people, I think, as if something's been taken from them, as opposed to, no, now it's more equitable. And so you have people speaking up, talking out about this and saying, no, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. And the guy's like, yeah, I didn't do anything wrong. Why am I being punished?
Right.
And I think that combination of things, since, he's a kickboxer, we can use boxing terms, right? Like that combination, that 1-2 punch, I think has confused particularly a lot of older men and a lot of younger men.
Yes.
And I think it's confusing for everyone as well, all the middle-aged men too. But I think particularly we're seeing older men who remember the glory days of manliness, where you could slap anyone on the ass that you wanted to, and you could call every waitress honey, and it was just wonderful. And then you have the younger men who hear these stories of glory and say, man, why did that change?
Yes.
That's kind of where my mind goes with it. Tana?
Well, the funny thing is that the playing field still isn't even.
Agreed.
Like,
you're right.
And yeah, how many people have said over and over again that someone else getting some more equality and some more rights doesn't mean like you've actually lost any. It just,
right.
Yeah. And
your resume is just not at the top of the stack anymore.
Well,
yes.
It probably still is in a lot of cases.
No, I don't. Yeah, fair.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, like, the things that you're feeling aren't inequality. It's actually what you're feeling is equality, or more equitableness is that you don't always get the job.
Right. And yeah, so what I guess what people normally say is like, well, what you're actually feeling is a loss of privilege, not a loss of like something that is your right or your due or whatever. Yeah. I lost what I was going to say. I'm a woman. I mean, we just can't hold on to our thoughts as well as Andrew Tate can.
True.
So I think that the church has a lot of responsibility in building this, right? And I don't think it's just the church. I think a lot of religions emphasize and empower men over and above women. Yeah. And I think that, the other thing I find interesting is people like Andrew Tate, people like Kanye West, they'll throw God out there.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was saying, Andrew Tate in his tenets will talk about sacredness. And so they'll throw God out there and be like, it's God wants you to. And so it's really interesting to me that in this exodus of evangelicalism, that this almost feels like a digging in of the heels. And they won't say Jesus too often. They'll say God. They'll keep it very generic.
He does mention God. Andrew Tate does.
Yeah.
Well, and he also recently converted to Islam. Just for reference.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he converted to Islam because he said it was more masculine or something. Wasn't that something I had heard?
I don't know.
Could be, could be.
That it emphasized manliness more.
He's definitely a man of faith who keeps in the basement and uses them on webcams. Right. Solid man
Yes.
of faith.
Even though one of his supposed tenets is that he does not condone violence against women.
Yeah.
Defined the way that he sees fit violence.
Yeah, I often wonder about that with those definitions, because I think what happens sometimes is someone will hear, these accusations against someone like Andrew Tate, and they'll say, "Oh, he was arrested for organizing a crime group to do sex
Yes.
trafficking and then also rape." And his defenders would go to his tenants and then be like, "Oh, but he says right here he wouldn't do anything violent against women." And it's almost like that becomes evidence in and of itself. Like, well, he said he wouldn't, and he holds that as a sacred tenet. So of course he wouldn't do this. Like, why would he? Why would he do that?
This is one of the
And
conversations that I
yeah,
was having with my son. Was that you've got these guys? Have either of you seen The Vow on HBO?
No.
It's about a
yes,
sex cult.
Nexium.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
it's Nexium.
Nexium. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so for me, where my mind goes whenever I see a figure like Andrew Tate, Trump, anyone else like that, where someone's willing to fight tooth and nail for them, if they do something, they just can't possibly have done it, right? They must have planted evidence. They must have.
Yes.
These are cult figures. They have made someone feel so good about themselves that they can't possibly be doing the thing that people are accusing them of doing. It just isn't possible. So really,
Right.
when what happens is that when we start having a conversation about how Andrew Tate may have done something illicit, then the person that sees him as their cult figurehead, even though they wouldn't define him that way, they take it personally. Then it's a sting or a slight against them because they've bought into the 41 tenets. They've embraced what he has
Right.
said as true. And in many ways, I think that is true. Because one of the problems I think in this conversation is the word toxic. One of the things that we do is we call something that has always been the way it is. Now we've put a moral word on it that I don't actually think is all that helpful in creating more dialogue and actually making change. So now you've called these kids who have just embraced this person because they're looking for some direction. You've called them toxic. You've put a whole bunch of other negative moral
Mm.
names on them. And now they've bought in even more to this guy because he's told them this is the matrix. They're telling you all this stuff and you've
It's
found
a
the truth.
self-fulfilling
Yeah.
prophecy then.
Exactly. And he
Oh,
knows that.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
the number of people throughout my church experience who say that they're speaking on behalf of God, and anyone that gets mad, it's because they're a prophet. And
Right.
Yes.
because so like if you get your knickers in a twist over something they said, they're like, well, that's just because you don't want to hear what God has to say.
Well, it's brilliant if you think about it. Like, in doing a little bit more research on this guy today, which just has left me feeling really disgusting.
Yeah, I'm saying right
I-
now that my YouTube search will never be the same again.
oh
I
no!
should have used a
Oh
burner account.
no!
I should have
Oh
used a burner
no!
YouTube account.
You're going to be seeing a lot of like fresh and fit and Hustlers University stuff. Congrats, man.
Oh, R.I.P. your feed. Yeah. So, oh man, now I forgot what I was going to say, Don.
Ah,
You said during your research today, and you
Oh yeah,
seem to
yeah,
be
yeah.
lamenting
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. So I was clicking on all the different things that he links to, right? And so right now he has like a join the real world thing, and there was this trailer. And what was really interesting to me about the trailer is it included a whole bunch of people saying that Hustlers University was a pyramid scheme, and all these people criticizing him and doing all this stuff. And I was like, that's brilliant, because by including the negative information, he's saying, it doesn't matter. Like he's giving the impression
I ain't
that,
scared.
yeah, right, exactly. Like these are the detractors. And of course oh my gosh, that trailer was so many different levels of ridiculous because he intercut
Yes.
it with all these Matrix references, which really pisses
Did
me
you?
off because I love the Matrix and I'm like,
I know. I know. It's like one of my favorite movies. And he's walking out while he's getting arrested, saying, "The Matrix has attacked me."
yeah, they sent their agents. Like, okay, buddy,
You know, what's interesting is I've seen a few takes on Elon Musk responded to that with a meme. And it's interesting. Some read that as Elon Musk supporting him, but
Huh.
a lot of European newspapers read that as him mocking Andrew.
well, Andrew Tate read it as support because he retweeted it.
No, Andrew Tate also put these pyramid scheme people in his video, so he might also just be doing the brilliant thing of
Oh, that's
I'll just
fair.
accept it as positive.
Yeah.
That, I should say
Interesting.
someone on his team retweeted it because he's in
Yes.
jail.
He's detained.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's not actually in jail. The whole arrest was faked. It was according
Well, this
to,
is well. So this is part of the phenomena that Trump started, right? Like you can't trust anything. So
right.
when you hear any information, it's, well, where did you hear that from? How do you know it's true?
Right.
And so you've got this word truth being thrown around like nothing. It doesn't mean anything.
Right.
And this ultimately was the conversation that my son and I had, that it revolved around, what does truth mean? So what he means when he says that Andrew Tate speaks truth is that he just calls a spade a spade. Like if he sees it a certain way, he says that. And I'm like, well, that's not special. I can admire that somebody speaks their mind, but he does it without a filter, and he does it in a way that's not considering the possibility that the other person might not share that worldview,
Right.
and saying
Or
that it's
considering
truth.
consequences. Yeah.
Exactly. And all I'm saying to him is he can speak all the whatever he wants to say. No one has silenced him. Like he's still got his message out there, even though he's banned from social media feeds. He can say what he wants to, but there are consequences to what you say. That's it.
Right. The thing that I find so interesting about him and people like him is they always say that they are grounded in logic. And they rail against people who are driven by their feelings and this is the F your feelings crowd, right? And
Yeah.
all that stuff. And the interesting thing to me about that is that I feel like they are completely driven on feelings. And I'm going to give an example, and I'm going to ask my husband not to say the name of the person I'm talking about because I do not want to reveal. I don't want to reveal the name. But I was talking to somebody recently, and they were like, "Why didn't Nancy Pelosi, or why did she call away the Capitol Police, or let some of them go home, or something like that about January 6th, right?" And I was like, what? Like, that's not a thing. That's not true. Like, there's nothing, And so I decided to look it up just to make sure, you know. And I found all these different fact checking websites that were like, Nancy Pelosi had no power over the Capitol Police on January 6th, 2021. Like, just no power, zero power. So there were all these fact checking websites. And then there was the chief of the Capitol Police who was like, yeah, Nancy Pelosi didn't call us away or tell us to stand down. And she had no power to do that. And then like one other official government person too was also like, yeah, that's not a thing. And so to this person, I was like, that's not true. She had no power. Oh, what? Well, what makes you think that? And I was like, well, 6 different fact checking sites and the chief of the Capitol Police and this and this and this and this. And he goes, well, we'll just have to see what the investigation finds. And
Uh-huh.
and like that's the kind of thing that I'm like, well, if you're actually driven by logic, then why wouldn't logic move you? Why wouldn't you want to find the facts? But
Right.
like I think Don pointed out earlier, there's been a war on fact checkers and reality and truth for a long time now, which I honestly found very fascinating because I remember the far right being very against like postmodern thinking and relativism and all that stuff. But then starting with Romney's campaign for president, they're like, we don't trust the fact checkers. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. And then you have, the whole alternative facts and all that stuff. And
Yep.
it was just so fascinating to me because I'm like, wow, you're really embracing relativism like to a terrible degree, So but anyway,
It's
yeah. So
true.
that's the thing I'm always finding fascinating is this. They're always just like, well, we're just logical and we're smart and we're this and we're that, and I'm just like, you are the
Yes.
most driven by feelings that I've ever seen.
Yes. Absolutely. And this is actually what my son was. I do feel like this messaging kind of turned my son into a little bit of a misogynist, maybe
Mm.
in the sense that he was like, "Well, who would you rather running a company or a country? A man, obviously, because women." He said this trope about women with their feelings. I'm like, "Hey, bud, who do you think started all the wars in history?
Right.
Why do you think they did that? Were their feelings hurt?
Right.
did they like? I think that their
Anger
feelings
is a
might have gotten there,
feeling.
right? Like, and I said, and the example I used actually was because he's a big soccer fan. I was like, what's happening when you and I are watching Argentina and France? We're all hyped up. We're yelling at the TV. We're yelling at the players who can't hear us and wouldn't care if they could. We're yelling at
Right.
each other. Are those emotions? We have feelings that we can't
Right.
control. Just like it's a ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
Well, and last
And
time I checked, robots always destroy the world, and they're not programmed with emotions.
Right. Right. Oh my gosh.
yeah,
So what do we think is the antidote to this, other than people? And I think in some situations it has to be men who are
yes.
willing to speak up, out, and against this.
So I think the antidote is not attacking these people. I think that what I've done in the past is I'll like make some kind of content that addresses Jordan Peterson directly or someone like that, and ultimately, because people are so loyal to these people, not even the ideas, really, the people, that if you go after them, you're screwed. They turn you off completely. So, in some kind of way, acknowledging the realities that they're all talking about. Andrew Tate talks about the how the rich get richer. He talks about that, and we can all agree that that's true. So he taps into these nerves that we all would agree are things we need to deal with. So we acknowledge some of those things and offer a different road, a different alternative that maybe sounds maybe similar, but gives credence to some of their ideas because they're not all these Looney Tunes just going around. They're captivated because they're looking for purpose and meaning and value. So giving them some kind of validation around that stuff and offering something different.
Yeah, I feel like also I think changing the goal um is important. Because I think too often the goal that a Jordan Peterson, a uh, Andrew Tate, I so bad want to just call him Andrew Taint all the time, uh, and folks like that. I think their goal is like success, power, money, and the number of people that have found those things to not lead to happiness. Like their goal is not happiness. Their goal is not peace, like shalom in themselves. Their goal is dominance. And I think most of our young men that are attracted to these types of things, I don't think that they actually want dominance. I think they want love. I think they want acceptance. I think they want to be heard, but not necessarily like heard in that you can't be disagreed with, but just heard and even feel like maybe they've been understood. Um, because I do feel that in our current climate, it's hard for a young male to complain and feel and express disdain for the shift that has happened. You're going to get roasted for saying something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that part of the danger is that instead of us creating spaces where people can be heard and go, okay, I hear you, that makes sense, the same thing that you're feeling now is what other people groups have experienced, and for them that's normal. For you, this is something new, and you're
Yeah.
processing it. So here's some ways that we can process this, and here's some ways that we can see why, even though this has created a really uncomfortable moment for you, that it's important for the well-being of your family, your
Mm.
community, uh, people in the world, and how we can embrace this complicated change and help to move it forward, as opposed to view the complicated change as being something that is out to get you specifically.
Mm.
Yeah, I think you've touched on something that is very, very difficult, because I know that in different stages of my um, deconstructing, not just faith, but also sort of the gender roles and rules that have kind of permeated my brain for a long time. In different stages of that, the last thing I wanted to hear was some guy be like, "This is hard for me."
Right.
Like,
Right.
you know,
Absolutely.
you know, like that's just. However, I do think that men need that space somewhere. It's kind of like the same thing. We did racial equity work at a job I had before, and there was like a safe space for the staff of color to talk. And they also determined, and it really it really made some people uncomfortable at first, but then people bought into it. That there was like then the white staff would meet separately, and basically the idea was that so they could work through certain things without the people of color constantly feeling like they had to do the education or would have to hear something that was offensive or whatever. And I wonder if the same sort of idea could be applied here, where there's like, it seems right now like the only alternative is something like Andrew Tate. Like you can go there and you can complain
Right.
about how women are terrible and certain men are pussies and like whatever, where rather than a place where you can go, you know what, this has been hard. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed my privilege. I didn't realize how difficult it would be to invite more equality. And I don't know how many spaces exist like that.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you where those spaces exist. They exist in the standum of of Peterson and Jordan Peterson and of Andrew Tate. That's where they exist. The
The
places
spaces
where
for
Well,
for guys to
I would.
say, I'm experiencing some tough things and I need someone to hear me and validate me.
Right.
So,
And
oh,
what
I
we're
meant a
saying is
healthy place.
what are yeah, what are those what are
right,
those
but
alternatives, right? Because I don't think it's on people like Tana or women or anyone else to have this
100%, right.
conversation the way you and I are talking about it, Don, which is like validating these poor white guys who are having some feelings. Right. So, like, really what it comes down to is guys that look like them who can speak to them in a way that's like, I get it, without some of the judgment that they're feeling from um, women, the way they